I know, this is my disclaimer. I know breaking up with people is very hard. Saying things to people that hurt their feelings is very hard. But one of, to me, the most callous things you can do is break up with someone over text message that you talk to. Like, I don't know any relationships that only exist in texting, and between you and I, if that is the only way your relationship exists, he's either in jail, which, by the way, they be talking on the phone, or it's not a real relationship. Like something's going on. It's either catfish or it's some weirdness. But to tell someone over text messaging that you want to break up with them, I just think it's very callous. I know that makes it easier because you could just get all your thoughts out, but that's not the way. Like, I just think it's already hurtful. That makes me feel reduced to me. Like, that you couldn't just like call me and tell me that. Like, that just makes the hurt worse.
Okay. So up until this very moment, I've always agreed with that sentiment.
Okay.
Until this very second. And not that I like don't agree with you at all, but I'm starting to think of her from a different lens, maybe. Is that, well, let me ask you this. Why? Like, why do you need me to tell you, I guess, in person versus the text? And this is the thing, right? There's been times in my relationship where we have tried to communicate things to each other, but when we talk, the emotions, the ability for a rebuttal, things get lost in translation, right? But when you write it, you take your time on what you're saying. You're trying to word it the right. You'll play with an and a the like for 5 minutes to try to put it in the right place and make sure that what you're saying is truly how you feel.
Sure.
So a lot of times when you're getting something written out, it's more thought out, and it's also allowing you the time to read it. And if you are writing back, responding in a way that's more thought out for you. So I think there's the technical part of it and the emotional part. I think from a technical communicating how you truly feel, writing is probably better. But from the emotional part and how it makes you feel, talking in person is probably better. And I think that's relationships, right? The theoretical easy part of it, but then you throw the emotion soup in there, and that's what makes
it can get chaotic.
Makes it more challenging. Like, most simple advice, just talk about it. That's pretty much the advice for most relationship issues. But when you throw the emotions in there,
talking turns into yelling, into crying, into stomping, walking
it gets
out.
Tricky. So like, what do you think about that?
You know, I think that's it's a valuable perspective. It definitely is. I have had difficult conversations in writing because we were incapable of having them in person, right? Like, it had just gotten to a place where we either wouldn't let each other talk, we wouldn't let the other person finish their thought. And so this became just like a better vehicle to have at least some sort of cohesion in our communication process. But I do think just we run from things that are hard, and this is just an example of that, because if you weren't breaking up with me, and you were just being like, I want to go to dinner, and granted, again, don't be crazy facetious. Yes, you can say I want to go to dinner over text message, but if you weren't having a difficult conversation, you would easily just call me. If you weren't saying something that is going to potentially hurt my feelings, you would just tell me. I don't like it that sometimes it's almost like we cower to when sometimes communication has to be hard. And that's just a reality of being an adult and a human being, that every conversation is not going to be roses and peaches and cream. We were just talking about this off camera. Like, sometimes you aren't going to like what I have to say, or in this case, this breakup is going to actually hurt your feelings. And I think before you go to have that communication, you have to accept the fact that what you are about to say, even if it's not intended to be hurtful, it is going to hurt them. You have to know that. Breaking up with someone who you were just in a relationship with yesterday, even if the relationship was crazy yesterday, actually saying out of your mouth, I don't want to do this anymore. I am finished with this relationship. I love you. Blah 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 blah. No matter what you say to pad it, whatever, it's going to be hard. And I think it's just a skill we have to learn how to do, whether it's in romantic relationships or otherwise. Because if you only can easily communicate when the topic is soft and easy and good, to me, you're not a good communicator. You have to be able to do it when things are good and bad, when things are easy and tough, when things are simple and complex. You have to figure out how to do it, because life isn't going to just keep serving you easy things. Like, there's going to maybe be a time where you're a CEO or entrepreneur. If you run away from having to tell your VP, hey, you're not doing what you're supposed to do. You're failing at these metrics for our performance. If you can't say that because you only want to be able to tell him, great job, you killing it out here, your company is going to suffer, because you can only show up when things are easy and eat and cool for you. So I do hear you. And I think, like I said, it's a very valuable perspective. And I think that if you know that it's going to be just like, but why? No. And if it's not going to be cohesion in the communication, I do understand doing it over text message, but I think it's worth a try. Yeah. I think it's at least worth a try to talk about it. And if you can't, then you have to do what you have to do.
No, I think that's a good perspective, and even to play devil's advocate on my own perspective, that I just shared, is that if your goal, a lot of times when you are communicating via text, is to not necessarily hurt the person's feelings,
sure,
or soften the blow, essentially, is that through text, although technically you can communicate all the words that you wanted to strategically, the emotion doesn't come through.
Right.
Through that.
I can't see your tone.
I don't know how remorseful you truly are, right? Yeah. I don't know if you are truly sad about this thing ending. It feels insensitive, especially if, like you said, we have been in this relationship and we've been doing this in person so far, but you communicate this to me in this way. Now, I've done it all ways. Like, I've stopped talking to somebody over text. I've said something to somebody over text and said, I'm willing to talk about this, but I just wanted to get my thoughts out.
Yeah. And I think if something like that was included,
that would make it different.
That would make it very different. I just
wanted to clearly articulate my thoughts, but I'm willing to talk about this if you have any questions or concerns.
Totally. Or even if you admitted that, like, I was scared to say this to you. Like, I'm literally in a moment where I'm struggling because I know this is going to hurt you, and I don't want to hear you cry. I know this is going to make you sad. Like, I think that you can be honest about the fact that how you may be choosing to communicate it could add to the hurt, but acknowledge that I'm sorry that I'm sending this by text message, or I needed to get my thoughts out. We can talk about it later. I think adding that changes it totally, but just not adding that and just telling me like that is like, so now we're dealing with two things. We're dealing with the breakup, but also how you chose to tell me about it. A man that I was probably just talking to, well, not yesterday, but in her case, a whole week ago. So I just think there's a way to handle people when you break up with them. One, you just really do have to accept the fact that you're gonna hurt them. It is gonna hurt. It's
just funny, like this situation in particular. It's not funny, but sometimes I think about like the different people I've talked to in my life, and I'm like, yeah, this one person I would have talked to would have been like, well, did your daddy tell you to text me too?
Right. That part.
You say you talked to your daddy about, did he tell you to text me about this too? That's the advice you got? Like, it's like.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's just, like I said, you don't need anything to add you don't need to add a layer to something that's already hard. Just try to push through it and like pick up the phone. But I do think whether he's being honest and genuine, and that he really, cause I'm gonna be the silly, hopeful girl that sometimes we can be, only in the sense that he could be genuine. And I think no matter what, regardless of whether or not he's genuine or not, whether this is game or straight up and down truth, he said what he said.
Very true.
The result is still the same.
Yes, it is.
He's not in a relationship with you. And so it doesn't matter now. It will matter on your actual question about waiting for him. But ultimately, if someone is telling you they are not ready for something that you're ready for, you absolutely need to believe them. You should believe them. And I know that women, we struggle with that. We very much struggle with that. We love to campaign and sell ourselves and, but I'm so great and I'm so this and what about those times and I can make your life so this and that and the third. We want to believe that we can convince them to decide on something that they're just not ready for. And the last thing you want is to be in a relationship with a man who felt like you twisted his arm to get into it, or you convinced him, or he did it or went along with it because of how hard you worked at it. Like he didn't really have to do much of any work. He just kind of laid back and it was like, I'm gonna just give her what she wants. That also creates resentment in him, because then he'll look up and it's like, I didn't really, I chose you, but I didn't really choose you. I felt pressured, or I felt like I had to do this because you wouldn't let it go and you wouldn't leave it alone. And then I didn't want to hurt your feelings. And I'm not saying his decision was right. I'm just saying that's a reality. And so when someone says they're not ready, believe them. Believe them. Doesn't matter if he's sleeping with 900 people behind your back. If he said, I don't want this, believe that. He doesn't want it. You can't do anything to change that. Only he can change that.